In an appearance on MSNBC's Morning Joe, Rashida Tlaib was talking about her experience as a Muslim American and what her electoral victory means for other Muslim Americans across the country. And she was sharing a personal story about, how Donald Trump's divisiveness has personally affected her. And she talked about how her son is afraid to reveal that he is a Muslim American, with his peers and friends. And the host followed up with a question and may have inadvertently implied that Rashida Tlaib was only running an anti-Trump campaign. But Rashida Tlaib responded with a really powerful follow-up that makes me feel just so enthusiastic about her being in Congress, because what she had to say here proves that she's a fighter for the people.
You said divisiveness does not work. What are you going to do about unitedness, if you may? Uniting the country and addressing the real issues: healthcare, immigration, infrastructure, our veterans. What is your strategy on that versus attacking a president that is sexist? He says some horrible racist things.
Look, I'm not attacking him. I was talking about being a mother. I was talking about the fact that my 13-year-old boy has to hide who he is. But I can tell you this, I didn't run to become the first Muslim woman elected. I ran because I have the third poorest congressional district in the country, where most of my schools don't even have clean water, where the corporate assault on working families in Detroit and Wayne County, where I represent, actually don't feel like they have any connection with our own government, that they feel like it's not about people. So I'm going to uplift their voices. I'm going to fight against that corporate greed that has infiltrated our United States Congress into our government, and I'm going to push back. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to fight for Medicare for all. I'm going to fight against discrimination. I'm going to fight against the ongoing assault from the car insurance industry in Michigan. We have the highest rates of car insurance because of the practice of redlining. I'm going to lift their voices up. That's what I'm going to do. And I will outwork the hate. I will outwork every single thing on the agenda of the right wing. I don't care if it's Trump or whoever it is that's leading the kind of push against the working families that I represent. But it's going to be loud, and it's going to be very direct, and it's going to be very clear. And it's going to be about those issues and those values. My district did not vote for me because I'm Muslim. They voted for me because I have the heart and love and passion to give them a voice in the United States Congress.
That person is soon going to be serving in the United States House of Representatives. Think about that. We have multiple people who are outspoken and unapologetically liberal, and it's so refreshing to not only see them be elected, but actually hear their voices in mainstream news. Because could you imagine someone like Rashida Tlaib talking about Medicare for all a couple of years ago? I mean, we saw Bernie Sanders talk about this when he was running in 2016, and it almost felt like surreal to hear him talk about issues like Medicare for all that I supported passionately. So to see it just become so common now, it really shows the power that's behind the progressive movement. And we've got to give credit to Bernie Sanders for catalyzing this movement, because this really is a slow-moving political revolution. I'm not talking about a revolution. I'm talking about a political revolution where we change the way that we talk about politics. We monopolize policy discussions. We change American discourse for the better. And this is evidence that we are starting to win. And what she said there was powerful, because I think that at a time when there is so much bigotry against Muslims, when there's so much divisiveness, she is putting a face to Muslims so people like Donald Trump can no longer just tell you what Muslims are and they can speak for themselves now. But here's what she's saying that I think could maybe even change some hearts and minds. She says, quote, "I'm going to fight against that corporate greed that has infiltrated our United States Congress and government, and I'm going to push back. And you know the way I'm going to do it. I'm going to fight for Medicare for all. I'm going to fight against discrimination." Now, she also brought up how the car insurance industry in the state of Michigan, which is her state, has been discriminatory, how they have outrageous prices and whatnot. And her message essentially is, regardless of what you think of me as a Muslim American, I'm going to fight for you. It doesn't matter if you think negatively about me, if you believe all the worst stereotypes about Muslim Americans, but I'm still going to fight for you to get health care. I'm still going to fight to make sure that your children have clean drinking water at their schools, to make sure that people are able to thrive in this country, not just survive, but thrive, not just survive on the bare minimum, but actually be able to live a fulfilling life. This is what she's saying, and it's powerful. This is how you change hearts and minds. You give people who don't often have voices a platform and allow them to control the narrative. And I think that this really is going to be powerful. I hope that it's the start of a change in the mindset of Americans in not demonizing those we perceive to be the other. Because at the end of the day, we all bleed red. We're human beings. We all want the same thing. We want healthcare. We want education for our children. And we're not so different. She also says here, quote, I'm going to outwork the hate. I will outwork every single thing on the agenda of the right wing. I don't care if it's Trump or whoever it is that's leading the push against the working families I represent. But it's going to be very loud. It's going to be very direct. And it's going to be very clear. And again, this is so important because we need fighters in Congress. There are people who are too afraid to speak truth to power. There are people in Congress that don't recognize the power that they have in Congress to affect change. There are Americans who are struggling to put food on the table, who work 40 hours a week and struggle to pay rent. We have an incoming climate catastrophe if we don't act within the next decade. And we just need a couple of people to stand up and be vocal. And we're going to have that in the 2019 and 2020 congressional session. We are going to have that for the first time in what feels like forever. I mean, we had one apologetic leader in Bernie Sanders. We had another in Elizabeth Warren to a lesser extent. But if there's only one or two people speaking out, that's just not enough to change the narrative. It's not enough to monopolize discourse. But when you have other individuals who are strong, who are bold, who aren't willing to back down from what they believe in, like Rashida Tlaib and Ocasio-Cortez and Omar, then that actually is enough to get the ball rolling. It's enough to change hearts and minds in the country and also influence people in Congress that speaking truth to power and speaking out in favor of progressive policies, it's not so scary. I'm doing it. I'm doing it on MSNBC, on corporate media. So why aren't you doing it? Why aren't you speaking truth to power? So this is why there's so much momentum behind people like Bernie Sanders, Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib, because they actually are saying what we've all been screaming for years now. And people are paying attention. So I am thrilled at this incoming set of freshman congressmen and women because we're going to have people fighting for us. Not, too many, but a small handful of people who are really able to further dialogue in American politics in a way that benefits the people, not just progressives, but the people. And I'm so happy about that.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.